Data. This country has never been reluctant to collect data on people's self-declared ethnicity, racial and national identities. It is one reason why this report is able to make with confidence the sometimes controversial arguments that it does, both about ethnic minority progress and the highlighting of continuing areas of concern. Arguments about discrimination almost always start with data, but how that data is framed and selected is crucial, and differences in outcomes need understanding and explaining. Differences, or disparities, are not always sinister and do not always arise from discrimination. Throughout the report, we express various concerns about the way that data is collected and used by public authorities. One concern is the lack of precision in some data collection. The census has gradually increased its granularity of ethnicity over recent decades, and for 2021 has 19 tick-box categories for ethnic self-identification, with Roma added since 2011. Yet too much data continues to be collected at the level of the so-called Big Five classifications: white, black, Asian, mixed, and other, and this is further compounded by small sample sizes, which makes meaningful analysis at lower granularity unviable. We know that broad categories like black or Asian hide hugely different outcomes between different subgroups, and can therefore be very misleading. This is pertinent in the crime and policing chapter, where there are inconsistencies in the ethnicity categories being used. For example, where the most recent stop and search data provides a breakdown of the 2011 census, 18+1 detailed ethnic categories, many other datasets do not, instead providing either broad categories such as black and Asian, or Census 2001 16+1 detailed ethnicity categories. One of the main differences between the 2001 and 2011 census ethnic categories is the Chinese ethnic group moved from the other ethnic group in 2001 to the Asian ethnic group in 2011. This poses challenges in comparing disparities across different datasets, and when using broad groups only, it can hide differences between ethnic groups that fall within a broader category. So we would urge public authorities, where practical, to use the most disaggregated categories possible. The Race Disparity Unit, RDU, has added clarity and transparency to these debates by pulling much of the ethnicity data onto one official website. But too much of the RDU data is still, through no fault of its own, provided only in the Big Five categories. The ONS has its own processes for determining which new categories should be included in the census. The two categories that could in future be helpfully subdivided are White Other, which does not distinguish between West Europeans and East Europeans, and Black African, which does not distinguish between Sub-Saharan African people in general and Somalis, who are now a substantial group in their own right. Then there is the broader issue of the way data is presented. We should, where possible, be reporting net disparities, not gross disparities. So, for example, most ethnic minority groups are on average younger and more likely to live in inner-city areas than the white population, and because crime is disproportionately committed by young people and people in big cities, this needs to be adjusted for when looking at the raw data on crime. This would be a regression analysis, meaning adjusting for relevant factors to get a more realistic comparison on a like-for-like basis. This is used by the ONS, for example, in its analysis of pay and wealth by ethnicity. There is also the issue of relevant benchmarks for ethnic minority representation. The general population benchmark often presents a more negative picture of minority achievement than is justified. Different groups have different histories, periods of residence in the country, class and educational backgrounds, average ages, so there are many reasons, apart from discrimination, why you would not expect that representation in a given profession, say, should match a group's share of the general population. This is especially the case for representation in elite jobs. Around 16% of the UK population belong to ethnic minorities. We would also ask for a more responsible use of statistics in general in sometimes emotional fields of race and ethnicity. The reporting of hate crime figures, which is touched on more than once in the report, should, for example, make clear that recent increases are in incidents reported to the police, and more reliable national survey evidence suggests that actual hate crime incidents are falling. It is worth considering whether a set of ethnicity data standards might be useful to raise standards, along the lines described above for all organisations in receipt of public money. The Commission agrees with the advice provided by the RDU in that when reliable data for the full harmonised set of classifications is not available, then the 5 aggregated groups can be used. It is further agreed that users should note the limitations of the analysis, in particular that data for an aggregated group, the Black group for example, can mask differences in outcomes for detailed ethnic groups, the Black Caribbean and Black African groups for example. Users should avoid, unless it's absolutely necessary, binary analysis, for example comparing white and other than white, because of the lack of analytical value this gives. Furthermore, if it is possible to show data for some of the detailed groups, then the RDU encourages consideration of this, a suggestion that the Commission also supports, noting that every level of disaggregation gives analytical value providing that it remains possible to draw meaningful comparisons. Recommendation 24. Achieve inclusivity. Disaggregate the term BAME. The Commission recommends that the government move away from the use of the term BAME to better focus on understanding disparities and outcomes for specific ethnic groups. This recommendation is further linked to that relating to data, with the related quality improvement plans and actions necessary to make this move under a data standard or charter. A fundamental aspect of the data standard or charter will be the harmonisation of ethnic categories in government departments and other organisations at the most detailed level, and should be promoted for use in analyses across organisations. Recommendation 23. Achieve inclusivity. Use data in a responsible and an informed way. The RDU should work with the Office for National Statistics, the ONS, and the Office for Statistical Regulation, OSR, to develop and publish a set of ethnicity data standards, building on the existing Government Data Quality Framework and the Code of Practice for Statistics. Monitoring compliance against the standards, for example through the OSR's programme of regulatory reviews, it will improve the way that data on ethnicity is assessed to be fit for purpose. The RDU should work with the OSR, DCMS, and the Independent Press Standards Organisation, IPSO, to apply the ethnicity data standard across all media and public communication channels.